The principles that apply to project management can also apply to event management, but he also, have a read of it, it's not a hard article to read. He's got a bit of a sense of humour. And he talks about how a group of project managers had to plan an event, and how the difference is with projects, you tend to have very structured steps and sequential steps. Event management, you tend to do your planning and then your event happens and you just take a deep breath and you go for it, because everything happens in that event time and you just have to flow. The biggest thing is to try and keep a clear head, because during an event you don't really have time to prepare responses. So you need to try and think through the things that can go wrong first, I guess. So have a read of that. Not a whole lot. Any comments from those who did read it as to whether they thought it was good, bad, interesting points?
What's that, the reading?
The reading, yeah.
I think you can relate a lot of it to sort of planning things for church.
Yep.
You need to make sure everyone, like, even though church is church, you've still got a couple of songs to sing, you have a prayer, you have an offering, a program. You have a program. People still need to stick to that, and you don't want to have someone go, "Oh, we're going to do 5-minute testimony time, 10-minute testimony," and they take half an hour. Like, you need to stick to time. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to get to 12 o'clock and then the preacher gets up and goes, "I'm going to start a sermon now." Everyone's going, "Well, I'm about to go home."
Sleep o'clock, we call it in Adventist churches. Yeah.
I know it's a sad thing, like we should still want to spend the whole day there being with them,
But shoulds and realities are often two different things. So try not to get caught up in what you think about life should be, or worship should be, or church should be. Deal with what it is where you are. Because if you're always thinking about how it should be, you won't work with what you've got, and you won't build what you've got to be something great. Do have a read of that. It basically just goes through 5 stages, which is your initiation, your planning. I really liked his bit in the planning about how he said planning an event is a series of seemingly never-ending tasks that most people never think about. And that is just very true. So we won't take much time on that. Executing, monitoring and closing, which is your assessment and feedback. So pretty much all of those can be linked into one of the 9 steps I referred to earlier. We've talked about the process of planning an event, but what is it that makes an event engaging? Audience participation.
Enthusiasm of the team. Like, you don't want to if pastor gets up and just sort of reads his notes and just sits there and like reading and going, "This is like really boring."
So you'd prefer it if I was standing here like this, just reading?
Get a bit boring. Like, those pastors that get in, they interact with you, they're talking, you can see their passion, it gets you excited as well.
Yep. So it's a connection with you.
Connection with the audience.
Yep.
Yeah. Relevancy.
Relevance, love it. Okay. So, okay, excellent. So feedback and interaction in it. What about accessibility? Is it easier for you to go to something if it's here than if it's in the US? Accessibility, cost. We've had relevance, we've had audience participation. What about, for me, an event is a little bit about escapism. I want to step out of my mundane, everyday life and either go to worship or go to a spiritual retreat. I might want to escape to relax. I might want to escape to be involved. I might want to escape to perform. I might want to escape to be served. But for me, that's every event has got a little bit of escapism in it. It's something different. That's what engages me. If it's just, "Caroline, do you want to come and sit with me while I edit?" I can do that on my own, thanks. That's normal for me. So there's got to be something a little bit different about it. Realise, as I said before, that you won't engage all the people all the time. Target your audience and engage them. also realise that your interests might be in the minority. If I am so interested in cross stitch and how it works and how you make the colours blend together, and I can talk to you for an hour and a half on cross stitch, how many of you are actually going to connect when I advertise that I'm going to talk about cross stitch? Yeah. Pretty much none of you.
That's solid, isn't it?
But I can almost guarantee that if I advertised something that caught your attention in an area of your interest, you would connect. Now, when you got here, I might end up sharing something about cross stitch that connected with that.
Mm.
But just be aware that your interests might be in the minority. Learn, do your research. Be enthusiastic, which was one thing we had, really, really great thing. If I stand up here and I am not really, into the class, I'm here because Lyle's asked me to be here. And I suppose we have to spend our time here because we've got to tick the box. Are you engaged? You're not engaged because I'm not engaged. When I'm passionate about my worship, when I'm passionate about my event, when I want to be here, when I can connect with each of you, I engage. And generally it becomes cyclical. If it doesn't work, and there will be times, recently I was involved in an event, fortunately it was not my event, and I look back and laugh because it really was a crying shame, but we look back and laugh because that's how we cope. It was a total disaster. I can't share too much detail because it would actually embarrass someone else and I don't want to do that. But at the end of that event, the person who was responsible got up and slunk out the back door and left me to take the feedback, which I didn't mind because I wasn't responsible and so it was easier for me to deflect. There were reasons things had happened, but it was just a major disaster. And when I was talking to them later on, I said, look, stuff happens. And that was stuff. And it was brown and it was smelly. And we all just got caught in it. There was no way we could have avoided it with the preparation and the information we had. This was a situation where our leader had not given us all the information. And we bore it. And we will go forward having learned from that. And next time we are asked to just do this part of it, we will go, no. You either let us take over that part of it as well so that we can't get hamstrung by someone else, or we don't do it. So learn from your mistakes. Learn to laugh it off. Hide in a corner, cry for a little while. You're allowed to. It happens. It's not nice, but talk about it with your team. Affirm those who did well. Enjoy those who come out and go, that was fantastic. You're thinking, do you have wax in your ears? Could you not hear this stuff that was going on that we were just crying about? They can't. Praise God, things sometimes go through a heavenly mixer. So when they compliment you on it, take it, roll with it, say you're glad they enjoyed the experience and go forward. Don't keep looking back. What is contemporary? I grew up and I love my home church with a passion. I grew up in a 3-hymn sandwich church where at 10 you got to do Sabbath school from the front. You always were put on a roster when you turned 10. You did not set foot on the rostrum unless you were an ordained elder. You only got to go on the first level. That's how I grew up. That was the type of... And it was deep, sincere, heartfelt worship with beautiful people of God. That's how I learned to worship. And as I grew older, I developed a little bit more of an individual taste. I am a more contemporary style worshipper, but I wouldn't say I'm a real left-winger. I struggle with some of the really contemporary practices. But I love heartfelt worship, no matter where it comes from, which part of the spectrum, and I can worship because worship is about me connecting with God. It's not about me liking that song. It's not about me liking the way something is presented. It's about me worshipping God. And it's about me being tolerant of various people's desires. So I would encourage you to think about contemporary as a very subjective word. Contemporary is not easily defined. And I see people having events now that they think are rip-roaring, great, good old, return to the old days events. Games nights. I'm trying to think what one it was I saw advertised recently. And I thought, when we tried to do one of those when I was in my 20s, it was considered old-fashioned. But we did them as kids and loved them. You know, a badminton night, sit around, play board games, barn dances, all different sorts of things. We used to play Spotlight because I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
So yeah. Running through the bush out in the central wheat belt of Western Australia. I grew up halfway between Perth and Kalgoorlie, so near Wave Rock, if any of you have heard of that. So that was my childhood. I'd like to suggest that you listen to people. Wherever you go, you may be fortunate enough to end up in a church where you connect with all of your parishioners. I hope you are. You may be unfortunate enough to be struggling with that. But if you listen enough, I think you will find a point of connection. Find out how you can help them transition into contemporary. What is it? Is it a word like event did for Nathan? It immediately raised a flag for him. Does the word contemporary immediately raise a flag for someone? If it does, use another word. Figure out what it is that's making them object. Figure out what it is they want to do to come closer to Jesus and work with them. Because it's all about getting close to Jesus. Get out of your comfort zone for other people and they'll get out of their comfort zone for you. But show them. Don't demand, show them. Lead by example. If there is any way that you can, encourage your members to look out for events that catch their attention. Because they will start to teach them to start to think critically. What was it about that advertisement? When the circus comes to town, who wants to go? And anyone who's got a connection with fun. Most people who have a connection with fun go, yeah, the circus is in town. Why? What is it about the circus that conveys an image of fun? So start to critically assess your advertising and get your members to do the same, so that when you're planning an event, you're learning from what's out there. You don't need to have experts on your team necessarily, but the experts can be really helpful. So recognise the stability of people. Sorry, I'll reword that. Recognise the need for the stability of the steady people. There's two sides to every coin. So the person that you think is steady and reliable can also be stubborn and inflexible. Now think of it the other way. When you're seeing this old geezer who's giving you a hard time as stubborn and inflexible, find out whether there's a way you can put him in the space of being steady and reliable. Those ones who are innovative and flexible can be unreliable. And they can also be quite impetuous. Look for the good in people, go with their strengths and help them build their spiritual gifts. So that when you've got something to do, you've already got worked out where people sit in the mix and you can help them develop their skills and talents. That all works together for good. You'll often have challenges in the small churches because your head elder is also your health leader and your worship leader. You know, and you've got these multiple hats. That's where you need to start thinking about networking, and I would encourage you, if you're in a small community, to engage your people in the community with their strengths. So where you're not going to be fighting against the actual ethos of the program, use them. You're building community spirit, you might be paying them, but you're paying into your community. That's awesome. They're going to feel blessed, and they're going to give you good reports to people around, and you're actually going to build relationship by your behaviours. Sometimes with small teams you need to outsource because you simply don't have the specialists in your area. And that's really a little bit of a cheats way for me to segue into the area of design, because Daniel's going to talk to you about why good design work's important.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I have been involved with a bit of design. I have studied it a little bit, but again, a lot of it has just been through trial and error. I'm thinking I might use an event that I planned as an example. A few years ago, a good friend of mine and I decided to plan a concert to fundraise. So one of the first things we did was to try and think of a time where we wouldn't have a lot of competition. And we both realised that, surprisingly enough, there is rarely concerts celebrating Easter. There's a lot around Christmas time, and we knew that homecoming happened, graduation happened, but not a lot happened around the Easter period. So we decided to do a worship concert that was focused on Easter and the Easter theme. We wanted to create an event that really brought people to worship and to think about what had happened, what Christ had done on that Easter weekend, but to do all of that through music. So we eventually thought of a name. We called it Celebrate Easter, and we had someone design the posters for us. We wanted the posters to really tell people what to expect. And so we had them designed in a way that the font that was used and the picture that was used clearly told them it was about Easter, but it was something that was worshipful and yet contemporary. So we used a font that didn't look old-fashioned. From memory, I think it was a little bit rough. It may have looked a little bit like handwriting. And the picture was of a cross on a hill, I think with some white material draped over it. And it had a soft, worshipful feel to it. And it inspired worship. And we picked those because we knew that people just seeing that image and reading those words, Celebrate Easter, in that font would get an immediate feel for what we were trying to do, what we were trying to produce. And it was a production, it was a performance that we were putting together. We spent months planning this and speaking with various artists. We took those posters. We also had adverts designed for newspapers. We had little flyers printed up that we could put in church bulletins. We sent notifications to church bulletins around North New South Wales and Sydney conferences. We discussed the option of putting it in the record, but our budget didn't cover that. So we had to think of other ways we could really get the word out there. We put it on Facebook, and we found, friends asked them to help promote it by word of mouth. So we used whatever means we had to try and market this event to all different audiences. Some people, like myself, will get invited to events on Facebook and never even notice them because I just ignore them. But I might see a poster, and if it catches my attention, then I'll be interested in going. I might just throw out a flyer that I see that's in the middle of the bulletin, but somebody else might take that home, stick it on their fridge, and remember that event is happening. Some people might respond to getting an email and putting it in their calendar. You've got to think about all the different ways that different people respond to advertising. And as Mum was saying earlier, think about what captures your attention. How do you remember events? What pulls you into an event? What makes you want to go? Is it the colours that are used in the design? Is it the type of advertising that is used? Is it the repetitive advertising? Seeing a poster and then a flyer and then an email and then an advert in the newspaper, all with the same image, the same text, it starts to get ingrained, and without you even realising, you remember. Think about things that you always know. You can see an M, a yellow M, and immediately think of McDonald's.
Because you said M, I just thought McDonald's.
Yeah. So their marketing, their advertising is brilliant because it's everywhere. It's on every highway. You've got these things, and the words they use, the pictures they use, they are things to draw you in and make you suddenly hungry, and you want that. You remember that colour, you remember that M, and so now you think, I'm hungry. One of your first thoughts might be McDonald's because they're everywhere. You see it everywhere. Think about that. Think about how can you put your event in everyone's mind. So the design was such a key because that was everyone's first impression of our event. That was everyone's first impression of the concert and what they could expect coming along to that. We had a graphic designer do that because we trusted them to make the best decisions about what sort of font, the placement of the font. There is a lot of there's a lot of stuff involved with design, and it's hard to condense it into a short amount of time, but just the placement of words on a poster can make a huge difference to how people read it. The colours that are used definitely make a huge difference. The style of font. You can have a serif font or a sans serif font. One may look more reliable, but it's also old-fashioned. One is more contemporary and attractive to young people, but it also looks more relaxed and not as reliable. So you have to decide what image you want to portray. And a lot of these things we don't even think about as consumers. We just see it and it's in there. So designers know that. So it is definitely worth talking to a graphic designer who has trained to get your image across. But design isn't just in the print. When it comes to church services, you have PowerPoints, you have presentations often. Not all the time, but often. You have bulletins, you have programs printed. Again, you want them designed well. I will walk into some churches and I'll see a bulletin that's folded crooked and it looks like it's been designed in Word, and it's got this thin twirly border around it in a bright pink, and everything else is black. And it just, I don't even want to open it and read it, because for me as a amateur designer, even that it's almost offensive. I don't want to look at it. The font, it's all Times New Roman, and it's really unattractive, and to me it just looks like they don't care. They've just said, we want to get these adverts out there, and so we'll just chuck it in a document and print it out and throw it at them. Whereas I go to other churches and they've put some thought into it, and it looks nice and clean and professional. It's got some bright colours in there, and it's got some nice fonts that are easy to read, some headings. It looks designed well, and I want to read it. It makes a difference. Then PowerPoints. I understand that not everyone is tech savvy, and not everyone knows how to design a good PowerPoint. But I think it would be good if people could acknowledge their own weaknesses, and if they have a PowerPoint, if they're not good at PowerPoint, ask a friend to design one for you, design a template that you can just put the text into or whatever it might be. Because for me, if I see a PowerPoint that is not visually attractive, it gets in the way of me hearing the message sometimes, because I'm seeing, yellow on blue, and it's hard to read, and it looks really ugly, and I can't concentrate on what's being said because it's just offensive.
You guys have all just had images come into your heads, haven't you?
Yeah.
Of PowerPoints
Yeah.
that you've seen. That's just about making. It's like fingers down a chalkboard.
So I had a lecturer come in last week, and she was saying she struggles to go shopping in Woolworths or Coles now because she sees designs on products that to her just are wrong. They're bad. She's resorting to shopping online because she can't handle it. There is people out there who have certain are skilled in certain areas. Musicians will hear things in music that offend them, that the majority of the audience may not even pick up. Designers may be offended when the majority of the audience may not care. But it is important to try and, if you can, cater for those people. But then design doesn't even stop there. That's all graphic design, that's all digital design. With this concert, we wanted, as I said, to produce a worshipful experience. And while we also wanted the project filmed and the program filmed, we, because of that, we actually did it twice. Once, we did the concert with no one in it was in College Church here. We did the concert once in the afternoon with no one except the cameraman in there. Full performance, everything as it was going to be in the night, because we wanted to get the video footage. But we also wanted to keep that worshipful experience. And so we had all the lights off. We had the stage covered in candles. And we had candelabras at all different heights. We had managed to get a few Persian rugs. And
That must have cost a fortune.
we also had a huge flower display that was done by my friend who was a flower arranger, and none of it cost us anything because we looked around, we talked to various people who we knew in different departments around college, at Memorial, in the community. We went to someone's garden and they'd been growing this thing for 2 or 3 years, and he was generous. He just kicked it off the plant and said, yeah, this has taken about 3 years to grow and it's about to bloom, but here, have it and put it in your arrangement. We just had people willing to help us out. Now, we would have been willing to pay for it, except that our budget was pretty small, and we had people willing to donate things. So it wasn't difficult to produce, but we had the camera people constantly complaining, saying it's too dark, you're not getting good footage, but we didn't care because our focus was the live audience. And so when the people came in that night to that concert, they immediately walked into a dimly lit room with all of these candles and some Persian rugs on the stage with the piano in the middle, that it felt like a worshipful atmosphere, and they immediately felt that and knew that. And at the end, we had people coming up to us saying that is the best concert we have seen in College Church, and it was so worshipful, it was so deep and meaningful. Now, we hadn't necessarily done anything too drastic, and a lot of people would have seen that as a huge production. We had a backstage room where we had a dress rehearsal. We had people walking on and off stage in certain ways that we had rehearsed. We had made sure we'd placed people in certain places on the stage. We'd had the sound guys there all afternoon setting up. It took us hours to set up the stage and get all of that stuff together. And so a lot of people would have said, why are you doing all this preparation and all of this organising? Just, it's meant to be worship, it's meant to be free. But there was a lot of structure in that program, and yet the people walked away saying that was so worshipful and so meaningful for us because we'd put that effort in. And even though it was such a production, it was worth it in the end because we achieved our goal of producing a worship experience for people, that they weren't distracted by the sound that was feeding back, or a stage that had a light out of place, or something was distracting them on stage. And they weren't distracted by someone who was unrehearsed in their music. So preparation may seem like you are producing a big performance, but sometimes it's worth it to get the effect that you're wanting in producing a worship experience for people. And design in all elements, whether it's stage design or it's graphic design, is a huge part of bringing people into a worship experience.
So outsource some things if they're important. Design could be one of your biggest ones. And I don't say that because we are a design company. I say that because it is that first impression. But that is one of the reasons that we set up 4HG. We wanted to be able to offer people, like churches, a cheap way to get design. We've said, well, if God's blessed us with these talents, how can we help use them to spread the gospel? So again, look at the talents of your members and see how you can utilise them. One of the other areas that Lyle asked us to speak on was media awareness and technology. I can see most of you have laptops here. Some of you, how many of you have got iPhones or smartphones? Anyone in the room who does not have a smartphone? Okay, so there's a couple, but I notice you've got a voice recorder going. Yep. iPads, tablets. How many don't have them? Okay, so those of you who've got smartphones, do you do the same things you would do on a tablet? Usually, most people do. I tend to do a bit of both when I prefer to use my iPad if I'm in meetings and things like that because it's a little bit easier. But if I'm just on the run, my phone. And depending on which system you're with, and I'm not even going to go down the path of Apple versus anything else, it can be quite easy to segue from one to the other. Good old pen and paper. I've actually got one of those digital pens, LiveScribe or whatever they're called now, so that I can write, because part of my way of dealing with things, I'm still a little bit old school. I like to write things. It's how I remember. It's a little bit kinesthetic. And so I write and it transcribes onto my computer. We are a 21st century church. We have to be. You need to acknowledge that there will be members in your congregation who know how to do this stuff and see the church as backward because they're not. You also need to recognise that there are people who don't have that technology. And so make sure you're not exclusive of either group. See how much you can get things to work together. Some churches have got digital sound systems versus analogue. Some have got plasma screens up the front for your singers to see their words on. Some have got none. Some are running full-on worship management software. Others are handwriting their lists. So just allow for, I guess, for yourself to get into the mode of your church wherever you are and work with that and try and encourage them to keep moving through the times. We have talked about those terminal slides on PowerPoint, so that was one thing I had down as just like, please work with anyone who's doing PowerPoints in your church and try to get away from them. How can we use social media to help our case? How many of you are on Facebook? Anyone not on Facebook? One. Twitter? Yeah, I can't be bothered, haven't got there yet. I don't really have a following, so. Email? Anyone not on email? Yay, I've got a winner. MySpace, does anyone use MySpace? Yeah, I know it's old, but I just kind of wondered whether there were some people who still went that way. Instagram? How many people use Instagram? Yeah, a little bit. YouTube? Pinterest? Yeah, a few Pinterest followers. How many of you blog? Yeah? How many of you are signed up to RSS feeds? Okay, how many don't know what an RSS feed is? Okay, an RSS feed is where you log onto a website and they'll have a little section that it looks like a Wi-Fi symbol. You click on it and they will send you certain announcements from their website. So you don't have to log in to get the updates, you get them sent to you as an email usually.
Like subscribing.
Yes, you have to subscribe. So you're making a choice to subscribe. What a brilliant way to get church announcements out off your website. You need to make an announcement? Tell your members, sign up to the RSS feed. You don't have to ring around. You only have to find out who hasn't subscribed to the RSS feed.
True.
Use these things in your churches. Lock in with people where they're at, because you may find that you can get a closed book going on closed group going on Facebook, where you might be able to have your young mums. One's got a child that sleeps from 11 till 1, another one's got kids that sleep from 2 till 4. They can't find times to get together, but they can chat to each other on good, spiritually enhancing topics. Build your churches that way. Build your connections. People connect on Facebook. They share their photos from their holidays. You're able to say, glad you guys are away having a good holiday. You can share up the front of church that Bill and Joan are away and having a great time. They know that they're being missed as part of the church family. So it's just a way to keep building your engagement. Someone who might not be interested in being in your worship team is very happy to sit on the front row with their phone and post something up to Instagram. Keep them engaged. Not everyone's ready to be part of being an upfront role, but a lot of people are happy to connect with other people on social media. Obviously, it's going to depend on the demographic of your congregation. But you'd be surprised. I love my guys at Wahroonga. I post a picture up on the What page because we've had somebody or other there for church, and they're all clicking like on Saturday night because they're at home watching what people are doing. The oldies are clicking like on the photos of the kids out bowling. The kids look and go, oh, Mrs. Perry thought that was great. It builds your communication and your intergenerational connection. Use it. We can bag it, but it's real. If it's a tool, use it. Make it work for you. Challenges. Quickly deal with challenges, and then I really want to get you to do this activity. Obviously, you're going to face challenges. I'm going to ask Lyle to share one of his that I know he faced just recently. Hymns and Songs of Praise was on. We got up here and went, wow, this is so awesome. And there's no Dr. Hythe. How did you handle that? Were you ready for it? I mean, obviously you were sick, but what did you do and what impact did it have on your team?
It's a really interesting question. I thought about it. You gave me a bit of a heads up on this. Here are the things that I think I learned from that experience. I got sick with the flu. I ran the rehearsal Friday night. The orchestras all come from all over Australia. The musicians are getting together. I ran the rehearsal Friday night, woke up Saturday morning and I was really in trouble with the flu. And the concert is due to have a big rehearsal to get everybody together Saturday afternoon, and it's going to start at 7 o'clock that night. And by 10 o'clock in the morning I knew I was gone. That's 7 hours to go, 7 or 9 hours to go before the concert starts. Here's what I think with some of the providential things and some of the planning things that I learned that got us there. I had prepared an absolute word-by-word script of the event. So just about every word Geraldine Duke was going to say, I put in her mouth. She's got real good flexibility, but the script was intact. So I knew that if I had to go to Siberia, that was fine. There was an interview with Geraldine Duke. I'd scripted that, all the questions word for word ahead of time. So I could say to my friend Brendan Stacey, who's a really good communicator, there's the interview with Geraldine. That's 20 minutes of the program. You can do that. I had backup plans. Every item of music was known by 2 or 3 of our top musicians. We'd all been involved in the choice. and in talking through how it was going to happen. So my friend Val Mayhill knew every word of the music, and Alita King, who was an excellent musician, knew in principle what we were going to do. So at 12 o'clock that day, Val May gets to Alita and says, Lyle's not going to be able to do this. The rehearsal is in an hour and a half. So Alita had an hour and a half to open up my music, but we'd already talked it through. I learnt really the importance of having being mentors and having backup plans, so that if you know you're not going to be there, someone knows what's in your mind. If it had all been just in my mind, I think we'd have been dead in the water. So it was teamwork, sharing, good backup plans. It just killed me not to be there, but one of my really good friends called me up at 7 o'clock and said, we're going to sneak a television line out to you if you tune up to this site on live stream. We didn't advertise it to the whole world. So I got to see it all happening, and it was really thrilling to see Geraldine Duke saying what I told her to say.
She's a good woman.
And Brenton interviewing her on the issues that we knew were important, and Alita doing her thing. She's just a fantastic musician. She did the most awesome of all of them, I think, because she had to go from woe to go in a very short time. But it was a really good lesson for me, and any time I plan those things, that's the model that I've got in mind, and that's what I'm determined to do all the scripting, all the planning, and make sure at least 2 or 3 other people know exactly what's in your mind, right down to the level of detail.
Awesome, thank you. How many of you were at Hymns and Songs of Praise for that? Did you think that it was a less than prepared performance? It was fantastic, wasn't it? I was there, and I was, having a little bit of an idea of what was going through some people's minds. I was just so impressed at how it all went. And it's a credit to you that people were capable and felt capable to step up in that way, because obviously you'd conveyed to them that they were capable of that. And so you as pastors are going to have to do that on many occasions. Make sure that your mission is conveyed. Very quickly, I'll run through a couple of other things that we have had happen. We had a situation where we arrived with the Promise, actually, in Townsville for the camp, only to discover that there had been another worship team booked for the Big Ten. The people who'd booked us, flown the Promise up there and all, were not to be found. Were not answering their phones. So we had a very... Alita, sadly, was actually off teaching at a school in Townsville. And so we had a fairly intense discussion with the leader of the other group. And I cannot speak highly enough of how the whole group resolved this. Marsha William, Ernst William's wife, and myself had a bit of a chat. And as we said, how we, as the two adults in this situation, obviously these guys are all adults, but we were seen as the two people who had to sort it out. Said, how we handle this, everyone's watching. Her group's over there and my group's over there. They see us, do we go hammer and tongs? We were asked and we were flown up here. We've been practicing for 6 months. How we handle that reflects our Christian experience, the reality of our Christian experience. Marsha and I talked about it, we prayed about it together in front of the others. They could see we were praying, and we just said, Lord, show us how to make this work. We've got 2 groups of people who have invested many, many hours of practice, and they want to lead people in worship for you, and they're quite different groups. Obviously you've got an octet, they're quite structured in their parts, and then you've got people who've come from regional Queensland who are more bringing their talents to the table to see how things go at the time. Yes, they've planned, but they have not physically been able to get together. How is this going to work? And so we worked out a plan, and I was so proud of how the guys got together. They I think they alternated nights, they did some nights together, different people did special items on different nights, and it all worked out well. But it could have been very messy. So really take your Christian experience in there. That was probably the most difficult upfront situation. We had our situation again on tour with The Promise. They were in Perth. We'd been off-site. They were the special guests for the Saturday night concert. They were doing special music all over camp. We'd been off-site doing a closing Sabbath at another church. Had a 20-minute drive, Livingston actually, we were coming back from. 20-minute drive back to the campground, and we got a call from the president. Caroline, there's no electricity on the campground. A car had hit a power pole, no electricity. Nothing, no. Saturday night concert is the big mission fundraising concert for camp. It's the be-all and end-all. And I said, okay, this was Glen Townend. I said, okay, Glenn, leave it with me, I'll get back to you. And I turned to Rob Dennis, who was leading The Promise at the time, and I said, Rob, how many acoustics, how many a cappella songs can you guys put together? So they're in the bus, and rang Glenn back and I said, Glenn, we can start your concert a cappella. Let's just see if the power comes back on. So 20 minutes later, these guys walk in. There were a lot of people leaving, but a lot of people were too scared to leave because they couldn't see. There was no light. And so we got these guys in, and they did a 40-minute concert a cappella. They were just wrecked by the end of it because it had been a big day anyway. As they sang their last song, the lights came back on and the rest of the concert continued. But the feedback we got from that afterwards was the Spirit of God was so present in that a cappella section because everyone was just giving their all. There was no way of shining spotlights on them. You couldn't see. We had emergency lighting only in the tent, so you really couldn't see. Some of the other things, I guess, that have happened, you could stay here all day telling stories, but it's something that you will face. And I referred at the beginning of the day, this morning, to a situation where I have seen a Sabbath service come together on a Sabbath morning and just be led by God. There was a reason for that. I had a phone call from a pastor who said, Caroline, I was the leading elder in the church at the time. He said, Caroline, one of my friends has just committed suicide. I need to go to this family and I've got the service today. And I said, go, just go. And he said, I said, no buts, just go. And I forget what time it was, I think maybe 6 in the morning, it was quite early. And I rang 4 or 5 people and I said, guys, I need you to do this. So I rang a couple of people and said, I need songs. I rang someone else and said, you need to fill in. We're suddenly pulling a whole program together because he'd had a special day planned. Within 2 hours, we had a worship service and we told them, we said, guys, our pastor's away because one of his friends has just committed suicide. And they were an Adventist family and many of us knew them. And it was a tough day, but it was Spirit-led worship that day. And there are times when you will have to do that. Just keep your head in the space of not reacting. When you get smacked in the face, don't go like that. Just breathe. Think outside the square. Think about whether you need to solve this problem or whether solving this problem is going to cost you more. Have you printed 200 bulletins and run out of paper? Does it matter that you don't have the last 100? Or if you leave your food preparation, are you going to have no food to feed people? Make your choices. You may not need to solve every problem. But just keep a clear head. That's the biggest thing I can say. And I guess my final tips are be open. Always be open. Like I said before, you do not know what you don't know. Be tolerant. Accept help. Take responsibility. And most of all, while you are here at Avondale College, get involved in every single thing you can because there are so many resources here that you do not have access to once you get away from here. So don't think about, but I'm not going to have that out there. Go, learn, do, experience, and take that away with you, because you are really in such a fantastic place. The amount of, I mean, I don't know that many of you guys. In fact, I know next to none of you. But there's a couple that I know. You know, Dr. Heiss is a brilliant resource. Use him and his connections and his networks. Get involved. Nick's mum is a brilliant event planner. Brilliant. Talk to her. Stephen's an excellent musician. Talk to him. Get to know ways that you can utilise your networks. Don't use people. Offer them something as well. You've got skills that you can raise up and work together. It's networking. That's what we're about. That's how we can do stuff without money, because we might offer something in return. You know, if you want help with stuff, and we can help, Wales got our contact details. But your activity now is to get into your website groups. And my preference would be for you to spend 30 minutes planning one of your events that you've advertised. You've all listed about 4 events, 3 or 4 events on your website. One of them is to be planned. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to have a little talk about it, and we're going to lovingly critique each other.